Good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for another Fringe Talkback. My name is Kate Coley, and I'm the Talkback producer for this year's Cincy Fringe. And today, right now, I am here with the Queer Feminists Next Door, the team that brought us Dream and, which hopefully you've all just watched, but if you haven't yet, you can still get your tickets at cincyfringe.com. I would love to have everyone introduce themselves, and then we'll get started.
Hi, my name is Katie Baskerville. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the director and dramaturg of Dream and.
Hey, I'm Sarah Willis, she or they. I am the writer and music director.
Hi, I'm Ashley Olivia Morton. I played Emma in Dream and.
Hi there, Darnell Pierre Benjamin, choreographer for Dreams and.
Hi, I'm Hannah Gregory, she, her, and I play Kinsley in Dream and.
Great. Thank you all so much for introducing yourselves. Now we can get started. So this ensemble is very aptly and clearly named the Queer Feminists Next Door. So I would love to know how all of you found each other, how this ensemble got started, and then a little bit about sort of what your mission is in your storytelling.
Well, originally this started with Sarah and I living together. We were roommates, and as we got to know each other, we figured out that we shared a lot of the same values as artists and collaborators. And Sarah told me about her project, and that's where it all got started. And so it all kind of came from you. So Sarah, do you want to talk a little bit about where this project and this concept began?
Yeah, so Katie alluded to it, but Katie and I met by chance through Craigslist. And when I was looking for places to live, and then we discovered we were these theater, queer, feminist, and we're just like, what? From there, when we went to go put this project together, we hosted table reads. The people on this talkback, we actually have all worked with each other before in various ways at different points in our lives. Again, a lot of it by chance.
Great. So this show and your theater company has a really clear mission of inclusivity. There's a strong support of sharing pronouns, which is something that is of course becoming more and more common, but it's very much part of the everyday language in this play. So I would love to know a little bit about how you use this queer feminism and maybe how you define it a little bit in your playwriting.
Wow, that's a good question. Yeah, I think part of our mission, right, is to tell queer stories that feature queer people by queer people, feminist points of view, and so things that are valuing and centering, like you mentioned, inclusivity. Featuring stories about people who are women and non-binary, or modes of storytelling or forms of storytelling that take inspiration from more feminist forms. Katie, do you want to talk a little bit about and Darnell and the other actors, how you kind of brought this forward in your work with this project?
I mean, I think that a really big part of creating this project and also creating this team of collaborators was wanting for me to tell stories that weren't about one type of queer person or one type of experience in the world. And in my feminism, you can't look at it and just be like, well, I'm gay, and so we're just going to talk about queer things right now. Or if somebody is a person of color, if they're Black or if they're Asian, like having that be their exclusive experience. People have multiple intersectional experiences of the world, and presenting this company as a company that is of a lot of different backgrounds, experiences, sexual orientations, gender identities, it's important to present those stories because that's the world that we live in right now. Darnell, Ashley, Hannah, do you guys want to talk about your personal feminism or identity as it relates to this project or the company?
I know for me, I came in the process, I think after like probably the first or second iteration of the show. And at first when I learned what it was about, I was apprehensive only because I was like, oh, feminist, oh goodness, I identify as a feminist, obviously. And at the same time, being a cis male, I kind of felt like, oh, maybe this isn't my space. And then it occurred to me, I was like, I had two queer female identifying individuals reach out to me and say, hey, no, we want you to be a part of this. And all I kept thinking of is you look at what's going on in the world right now, and the way that we can best ultimately make change happen is whenever those of us who aren't a part of a community come in and say, you know what, but I am going to be present, I'm going to listen, I'm going to be a part of this, and I'm going to help make some stuff happen. And so in that way, I kind of approached it with choreography. I wanted to know how each of these people saw their characters, where they had an initial direction. Likewise with thinking about the writer, likewise with thinking about the director, and all of these perspectives, all of these feminine perspectives, and being able to say, okay, well, how can I best serve it? And the best way for me was making sure that it came from them. And I just basically kind of helped facilitate and create something that was of and for those people.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Yeah. Ashley and Hannah, anything to add on that?
I think the people that have spoken have already said it best. Alluding back to what Darnell said, just listening to what our writer Sarah and our director Katie had envisioned for this piece, and helping to lift up and make those voices loud and heard. And to speak to what Katie said as well, just like gay people are more than just gay people, queer people, you know, we all have such complex layers of us that one word will never be like the ultimate descriptor of who we are as people. And so I think showing a real, live, deeply layered side of characters that are often not given those layers.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I just think again, I feel like I'm just trying to amplify the voices that are within the script and in the music, because what I love so much about this show is that really anyone of any race or gender or you know, sexual orientation could play any of the roles in this show. But I think it's necessary to showcase queer and people of color because they're so often pushed to the side or made to be like a subplot instead of the main plot. So it's not even like what the characters are going through in this show is not necessarily like, oh, this only happens to queer people or anything like that. But the fact that we have so many stories that we can relate to, but people don't see themselves in, is more of what needs to change than the stories themselves.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's super well put. And something that I think is so special about this show is that it's inclusive and it's diverse, but at the same time, the story itself shows us that all of this diversity is sort of within one person at the same time. And so that idea of being super interconnected while super diverse is really beautiful. So I have an audience question for you all that I'm going to tie into one of my own questions. So this show has a huge variety of storytelling, and I think that you've all really made the most of a digital platform. It's got, you know, song and dance and dialogue and monologue. But what Ricky and Dana from our audience would like to know specifically is how you all created such a distinctive visual style with this show.
We worked really hard to find different ways to not hide the fact that we are on Zoom, but find ways to make people feel like they're in the same room in that process. So once we got news from our editors that we were allowed to move boxes around in space in the editing process, that kind of changed everything, and gave Darnell the possibility of having multiple people on, like multiple performers perform, like the same performer, sorry, performing different numbers within the same song. It's very cool. It's not something we would ever get to do. Everything that we were able to do on Zoom is not something that we would have necessarily been able to do if we were doing it in person. So it was really fun to expand our personal creativity to a space that we hadn't before and figure out how can this play exist and make sense for this platform and not be the play version, but at home. This is really the Zoom version of Dream And. And so finding different ways to tell the actors where to look. These amazing performers had to sometimes look at just like words on a screen and not even get to look in each other's faces while they were trying to connect with each other in order to make these weird platform dynamics work. And I think that it was a challenge, but I think it's one that everybody kind of dove wholeheartedly into. I mean, I think that we had a lot of opportunities. Darnell, what was it like choreographing for the same bodies in different moments on screen?
Well, it's kind of adding on to what you just said, Katie. I feel like one of the things that we knew early on was that we wanted to make sure safety was number one. So we knew we were going to be using Zoom, and that was just something we're going to have to embrace. And embracing that, you can't try to do theater. You have to, because this is not film either. It's like some weird new medium that we're discovering and creating right now. What a great time to be part of that, right? Despite all the bad, the fact of the matter is that we are exploring something new. And so for me, as a choreographer early on, what I learned on day one was that, it is really, really, really hard to teach choreo live. So what I started doing then was getting as much ahead as possible and making videos to send to the performers. So that way, at least they would have some time to kind of at least get the basic skeleton. And then I just kind of come in a live rehearsal as more of a, okay, great. Now that you know that, now let's shift this, let's shift that, let's make this leg go here. And it was challenging because you're dealing with different speeds of internet. You're dealing with pets, you're dealing with roommates, you're dealing with limitations of individual spaces. There were so many elements that went into it, which is why I think one of the things that helped the process from the beginning was that both Katie and Sarah came into it knowing that we have this limitation, but now let's maximize what that limitation is. And I jumped on board. And from there, it was just, in a performance, as far as they're concerned, everybody came in and just did the work. There was one day we sat and recorded choreo for 8 hours straight.
Wow.
And it was, I think, as much as it was a challenging situation, I feel so proud of what we've created. So at the end of the day, it was a huge team effort of every single person coming in.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that explanation. We have an audience question related to this that I think Ashley and Hannah and Sarah, we can get a little bit from you guys on, which is from Randy. Randy wants to know if any of you see how you'd like to take what you've learned under these restrictions, doing Zoom rehearsals, Zoom recording, into your work in the future, whatever the new normal is, what you're going to take forward with you.
I think that's a great question because I was struggling with that myself. I feel like what I do how I have structured my life around keeping my home and work pretty separate. So I initially, with quarantine, was having a really hard time with trying to work from home. I don't enjoy it. I'm not crazy about it at all. But I think going through this rehearsal process has started to show me how I can self-discipline myself to use my home as a multifunctional space, because that is the new normal and that's just what is needed at this time. But And I was very intimidated by Zoom in the beginning in general. If there were more than like 2 people on a Zoom call, I wouldn't do it. But until these rehearsals when I didn't have a choice. But like I feel like pretty quickly, like once I got used to the format, I kind of welcomed it, and it was really nice to be able to still feel like I was working in a group atmosphere. So I started to really look forward to rehearsals because I knew at like a certain time every day that I would get to like spend my time working on something that I cared about with people that I cared about. And that has actually been like really helpful during this time for me.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, there are a few things, because being both on the writing side of this and also the music direction side, there were a lot of things that I learned. So one, I've talked about this with people on the team before, but especially with, like Katie and Darnell and the actors, really everybody. The script was conceived for the stage. We made slight tweaks for things that would have just been impossible. But for the most part, we were like, we're gonna make this work. So we all know that you write differently for the stage versus a screen. But I don't think even in this format, you would write for it the same way you would write for film or television. What I think is interesting about things moving forward, and we started to see this explored with some of the live broadcasted musicals on like primetime television, right?
Right. Yeah.
But what are the ways we bring? What is the theater-ness that needs to stay to make it feel theater in a virtual, separated atmosphere when we're not in the same room, feeling the same energy and breathing the same air, right? So I think about things of what opportunities are there for audience interaction? What are the qualities that balance this liveness versus screen? I mean, one of the things that were really cool is that things that would never read in a big theater, we were able to do and would read right here.
Right. We even have a question about that. Someone wants to know more about the choice to do some in black and white and some in color. And it's like, that's not something you can literally do on a stage. Yeah.
That's very true. Like, we'd only be working really with what we can do with lighting, costuming, makeup, some sort of screen filter, right? Yeah, absolutely. I don't know, Katie, you want to talk a little bit more about those color washes or?
I mean, we had to figure out ways to make people feel like they were together, even though they were in their own spaces. And actors already have to share so much of themselves with us when they are performing, but they also had to share their apartments and their personal spaces throughout this whole thing. And we are infinitely grateful that they were able to be that intimate, but you can't expect every single person to have an entire multiverse in their apartment. That doesn't exist. And so when we learned that color washes were a possibility in editing, finding the right way to represent it, especially considering that Sarah already wrote in the beautiful prism metaphor into the text already, it seemed like the most logical fit for us to find a way to define each of these dimensions in a way that was easy without having a lighting designer or a set designer to be able to define space for us.
Great. Thank you so much. I think that answers Nicole's question brilliantly. Hannah, I'd love to hear a little bit from you about what you'll be taking forward from this experience and from working in this particular way.
Yeah, totally. So I am a strange millennial in a way that like technology does not come easily to me at all. So I think for me in a practical way, just kind of learning how to navigate a technical experience that invites other people into the space, so to speak, with you has been a huge learning experience for me. And I'm a writer as well. So just logging on to a lot of these different Zoom calls and Google Hangouts has really shown me, like, if you leave the sound on, you can hear, when people are laughing and how they're reacting, versus if everyone is muted and you think something is going to land and you don't hear anything. So for me, it's really been a big technical learning experience. I can't say that I won't be like running back to the theater when we can all be together, because that shared heartbeat, I think, is really the heartbeat of what theater is, that shared experience, that being together, because you know those energies are just like pinging off of each other, and it's really truly magical.
Great, thank you so much. So we have a couple of minutes left, and since there are 5 of you, I would love to use this time to ask you how we can support you and your work in the future, moving forward. If there's any other projects that you have available right now that you'd like us to check out. This is also an opportunity to plug any organizations. If you have a Patreon, if there's any way that we can keep supporting you as audience members while we don't have the same kind of live theater experience as we're used to. We can go in our introductions order to make it easy.
This is the only project I'm currently working on. So I really hope that all of you will watch it and tell your friends, share it with the people in your lives that you think most need to hear these stories right now, and find anything that you can to give to support to the theater artists in your space and in your community. That will do a big help for me and for all of our team, I know.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, a few things. So one, if you want to learn more about the show and see some of more interviews and promo stuff, we're on Instagram and Facebook at dream.and.musical. You'll see a full list of our collaborators, their handles as well. Also, I think broadening out, if you are interested in more kind of media representation work in terms of queer and LGBTQ community representation, the organization GLAD monitors representations and does script consultations and speaks out against anti-LGBTQ representations. I'd also encourage you to support Black Lives Matter, which is a leader in the fight against anti-Blackness. So I think all of those will help continue, and many more organizations will help continue with some of the missions and themes that are in this show.
Great, thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, this is the only show that I'm currently working on right now. So I just want everybody to see this show, and I feel like it's such a ray of light during this dark time. And so I feel like any and everyone would benefit from seeing a show about community and inclusivity. And I need to find it. Of course, I don't know the name of it, but there is a bailout fund now for the protesters, for Cincinnati protesters. So you can donate to that to help post bail for people who've been arrested for peacefully protesting in the Cincinnati area. That would be great.
Great, thank you so much. Yeah.
Everything everybody else said. And for me, this is sort of at the, I've been working on a bunch of different projects over the past few months, and this was the last one. And I've decided I'm taking a little break for a lot of different mental health reasons. And I would say, as far as send some love to PFLAG, send some love to queer organizations outside of HRC. Look for the nitty gritty ones, because they're the ones who are really doing heavy groundwork. Support Black Lives Matter. Support, as a Black gay man, for me, intersectionality is all I know. And so my biggest challenge to people is that if you like shows like this, then find that same empathetic connection with this show, with shows that are talking about Black issues, with shows that are talking about disability issues, shows that are talking about, there's so much out there. And I think that we just have to allow ourselves to have permission to acknowledge these other things. I also want to give a shout out to, I'm on the board of Pones, local dance group, and they're doing proximity and they're doing some beautiful work. Check out what they're doing. I also want to give a huge shout out to Jackie Smith, who was our fantastic stage manager. And I'll tell you what, because there's nothing you learn more than when you're forced to work in a new medium, how important a stage manager is, because they are in the room with designers. They know how it all works. And she was invaluable to this process. And other than that, peace and love, stay woke.
Beautifully put. Great.
Yeah, so I have a few writing projects that I'm dabbling in, and you can find me on Facebook or Instagram at Dissent, a Murder Ballad. That's where I put all my creative output. But to echo the sentiments of everyone else here, GLAAD, other LGBTQ organizations, Black Lives Matter, if you are feeling lost, you can Google it. It's very simple, and it will produce thousands and millions of places you can give and ways you can take action. If you're not comfortable, going out and marching on the front lines, donating your money, donating your time, using any platform that you feel you're able to lift up other voices of people that don't look like you or don't sound like you or don't have the privileges that you have.
Great. Well, that is our time. Thank you all so much for those very honest, vulnerable answers. I really loved getting to know more about this particular process and about what all of you care about really deeply as artists. So I really appreciate that, and thank you. Everyone watching, make sure you stay tuned. At 5 o'clock, you should watch The Unrepentant Necrophile, and then join me back on here at 6 for a talk back with the Cold Hearts, the creators of The Unrepentant Necrophile. But for now, that's all from us, and thank you all so much.